Hi everyone, this is the latest addition to the Vivo X200 Pro series, with of course the X200, the X200 Pro, the X200 Pro Mini and the X200 Ultra. So let's discuss the camera capabilities in this shorter video, because of course these are first impressions of the camera. Either way, let's jump into the video and start talking about specs first. The Vivo X200 FE, a new addition to the X200 series. On paper, the phone looks genuinely interesting. Why? Because we have a massive 6500 mAh battery inside. Well, unless you live in Austria or Hungary, then you will be working with a 5300 mAh battery instead. Still, for a phone with a 6.31 inch display, that's a big battery, and that should mean on paper that we should get excellent battery life. And the story gets more intriguing because it uses the Dimensity 9300 Plus. Now of course, a lot of phones that use the Snapdragon 8 Elite get quite toasty, and the X200 Pro uses the newer Dimensity 9400, and that one doesn't get anywhere near as warm. This probably means that Dimensity is making a really efficient chip here, and that combined with the smaller screen and huge battery could deliver some impressive battery endurance. But of course, this is in theory for now. We still need to properly test it in real world and of course test it out for a longer amount of time to see how the battery holds up. Now of course, what really matters here on this channel is the camera. The Zeiss collaboration continues right here with the X200 FE. It features a 50 megapixel main sensor with a sensor size of 1/1.56 inches and an aperture of f1.9. And of course it's a 23mm equivalent focal length. For the telephoto we are using again a 50 megapixel sensor, and this time a 1/1.95 inch sensor and an aperture of 2.7, and it is 70mm equivalent. Although this is where it gets a little bit odd and we have a little bit of a bug, but that's just numbers and it doesn't really affect anything. However, if you take shots with a 3x zoom, which is technically 69mm because it's 23mm equivalent times 3, they are labeled as 73mm. And then when you have the shot itself, it's actually 69mm. There are inconsistencies on paper right now. Naturally, it doesn't really affect the image at all, but it is something funny that I noticed while using this. As for the ultra wide, nothing groundbreaking here. It's an 8 megapixel sensor with a 1/4 inch sensor size. It will do a decent job in good lighting, but don't expect miracles from it. Storage options, we are looking at 256GB up to 512, RAM configurations from 12GB up to 16GB. And yes, plenty of colors to choose from as well. Yellow glow, pink vibe, black lux, and in my case, blue breeze. For the display again, it's a 6.31 inch LTPO panel with 120Hz refresh rate and a 1.5K resolution. But at the end, we are here for one reason that goes above specifications. We are here to showcase what the camera can do. So let's dive into that and see what my first impressions are of the Vivo X200 FE. So let's take the Vivo X200 FE out, and realistically that's the only thing I'm taking out, and see how the camera performs. But before we begin, let's talk about the new style called Classic Negative. This is ported over to this Vivo X200 FE as well. But in turn we also have two different styles that join this lineup. Positive Film and Clear Blue. And you are seeing them now side by side and notice that difference in terms of the tones and the mood itself. What is missing however is the Zeiss black and white mode. That said, we still have access to silent style. However, it isn't quite the same. Now, since this is a Vivo Zeiss collaboration, the photographic style is very similar, very familiar to what we know from Vivo. We're looking at bright and vibrant shots, and honestly, even more punchier than what we saw on the Vivo X200 when it comes to that brightness and saturation. The results somewhat come across fairly natural, but they lean towards more of that brighter shot itself, and of course more saturated on that spectrum, but in terms of colors, it's quite natural. The trade-off though is that sometimes images can look a little bit flat, at least in these first few shots. We're gonna test it out with adjusting the brightness as well to see if that makes any difference, but these are initial impressions for a reason. That also being said, we do miss that capability of adjusting a lot of preferences, like the brightness, like the contrast, like the saturation, and of course the sharpness. As of right now, the only thing we can control is the color and the exposure. That means that I cannot adjust the contrast itself. That adds a little bit of depth to the shot itself. While naturally that is a subjective preference, it's still a better separation to really elevate the difference in depth between everything in the shot itself.
Facing camera 4K 60 frames per second, which is fine. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of using the front facing camera apart from some positions where I'm like, I'm gonna talk about the story or whatever, but when it comes to the front facing camera 4K 60 frames per second looks fine to me, but you know, I think a lot of phones look fine to me when it comes to the front facing camera. Okay, 60 frames per second. You cannot change to different focal lengths, so other camera sensors itself, but you can zoom in to 46 and actually digitally up to 2.9 times. So back to 1. Let's now showcase the ultra wide, because of course that is limited. With the ultra wide, again limited to 1080p and 30 frames per second, which is not something that is surprising when you have an 8 megapixel sensor. This sensor we've seen a lot on different phones and it's just not the greatest. You can however change to different focal lengths while doing so. And 4K 60 frames per second. Let's go for a little walk to see the stability.
Now, when looking at the ultra-wide, its limitations are noticeable, especially with a side-by-side comparison. That said, credit where credit is due. Among all the phones I've tested with this exact same sensor, Vivo pulls out some pretty decent results. Even though I wouldn't be impressed with the shots itself, for the sensor that we're getting, they still do pretty well. Personally though, I hardly ever use that ultra-wide. I'm far more interested in the telephoto capabilities. And in that regard, the Vivo X200 FE definitely delivers. The telephoto lens here is quite large for this category, and the results are pretty solid. Quite sharp, well exposed and very usable. Sure, it won't go head to head with the Vivo X200 Pro or the Ultra, especially with their massive periscope systems. But we're going to have to test it a lot more to see the capabilities of the camera itself in a lot of different situations to really give you a rundown how this Vivo X200 FE performs when it comes to the camera. Right now I would say I've taken some really solid shots, but it isn't something that can compete with the Vivo X200 Pro or the X200 Ultra, naturally. This is a phone that will however compete when it comes to the battery life itself, and if you want a phone that is smaller than for instance the X200 Pro or the Ultra, then this might be something for you. So for those, I want to know, is this sacrifice worth it for you when it comes to the ultra wide and of course missing that periscope system that you have on the X200 Pro and the Ultra for the smaller, more compact body, but still with a 6500 mAh battery inside? Let me know in the comments below.
I will say when it comes to the temperature of the phone, it gets a bit warmer, especially like warm days, like 33-ish degrees outside in Celsius, naturally. It gets a little bit warmer, but nothing really uncomfortable yet. So yeah, do with that info what you want. Right, the phone might not be overheating, but I am. So we're going to call it there when it comes to this second day of testing the Vivo X200 FE, because it's getting quite warm.
At the end, these are initial impressions and I don't have much data to go by just yet, because you need to have different environments and different situations where you can fully test out a camera and showcase the capabilities and of course its flaws as well. What I do hope is that the new styles will also be developed for the X200 Ultra and X200 Pro, the X200 as well, because I do like that extra edition and I'm curious to see how they perform on those phones as well. When it comes to the camera, we're gonna find out how it holds up and how it's going to perform in the longevity of it and different situations. So be sure to subscribe so you can see those situations as well when it comes to the X200 FE. Anyway, before we leave, I really want to thank my members. Thank you so much for the support. You guys mean the world to me. It really helps out a channel size like mine. And of course, if you want to become a member, you can by clicking join somewhere below. And I would really appreciate it if you did, but you of course don't have to. Anyway, I do hope that you enjoyed these initial impressions of the Vivo X200 FE and let me know your thoughts so far. Anyway, have a good one and talk to you guys in the next.